Oh, good day, everybody. This is Yin Yang with Morsels of a Thought, number 1853. And while I'm getting ready with all the lighting here, good day. Good day. Today is Wednesday, and on Wednesday, I like to call it Words and Wisdom Wednesday. And my favorite author for wisdom currently is George J. Chanos because he's got lots of wisdom. Wisdom is knowing the right thing to do. Okay, and doing it is virtue. Now, let me get a bookmark. We are going to start. 1853 is the day I'm starting here, and we were reading chapter 130, Economic Inequality, in George J. Chanos's book, Millennial Samurai, Book 1, A Mindset for the 21st Century. I sure hope I put my phone on silent. Ugh. Okay, so I have to say, it's 5:10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and when we go over to that other time zone, daylight saving, it's going to be a confounded fourth. I want us to choose one time zone, one time zone the entire year, and then we don't have to worry about heart attacks. Oh, God. Not that I have had one, but God, the amount of time it takes me to adapt is 4 months, honestly. Economic inequality. Okay, this is chapter 130. America is experiencing the biggest income and wealth disparity in nearly 100 years. 7 of the richest men in America are among the 10 richest people in the world. Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and Mark Zuckerberg now control more wealth than the bottom 150 million Americans. Nearly half of men ages 18 to 34 now live with their parents, the highest level since the Great Depression, capital G, capital D. 78% of the United States population now lives paycheck to paycheck with essentially zero savings. That is the truth. At least in this house. In 2018, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, a record number of Americans, 7 million, were 90 days or more behind on their auto loans. This is a troubling statistic. Auto loan payments, like rent, are usually prioritized. People need their cars to get to work, and people can sleep in their cars if necessary. America has historically experienced rising wages. It was the foundation of the middle class. For millions of Americans, life got better with each year as the value of their wages increased and our economy grew. This is no longer happening. The middle class is disappearing. For most Americans, real wages have been stagnant or falling for decades. Low-income earners now make less in real terms than they did in 1980. And middle-income earners make just 6% more than they made then in real terms. Instead of earning more over time, people are actually earning less in terms of what their wages can actually buy. So if I could buy an apple last year, but I can't buy an apple this year, then I'm making less, even if the dollar amount is more. You see? That's what I think. Told my cousin that. Investments in financial assets have dramatically increased the wealth and incomes of the wealthiest Americans, while average Americans are worse off than they were decades ago. Many blame private equity. Since 2008, private equity has quintupled to $5 trillion. Diane Standard, Standaert, of the Center for Responsible Lending, capital C, capital R, capital L, says their superpower is their obscurity. Wow. Private equity. Private equity firms borrow heavily to buy companies. They then often sell off company assets or cut jobs to generate the cash required to repay the loans and pay shareholder dividends to investors. Workers are typically harmed by these actions. At Toys R Us, 30,000 workers lost their jobs in 2018. Many had worked at the company for years. Sears, Radio Shack, and Claire's were all gutted by private equity in the same year. Life is hard for millions of Americans. Most people are forced to borrow just to keep up. Historically, the average American had very little debt outside of a mortgage on their first home. But after almost 40 years of declining real wages, Americans now have to go into serious debt for just about everything they buy. Americans now have nearly $13 trillion in total debt, more than $1.5 trillion in college debt, over $1 trillion in credit card debt, and more than $1 trillion in auto loan debt, all record highs. The debt load for the working poor has nearly quadrupled in the past 20 years as a percentage of their income. We are reading from George J. Chanos' book, Millennial Samurai, Book One, A Mindset for the 21st Century. We're reading from we're trying to do do magic. We're trying to create magic, which is George J. Chanos' words for creating action. Action is magic. Action is magic, according to George J. Chanos, and it's true, I believe. Anyway, and most of this debt that was mentioned, Americans have nearly $13 trillion in total debt, and most of this debt will never be repaid. We now have the highest ever percentage of people on food stamps, double the historical rate. In some states, nearly 10% of working age adults receive disability payments. From 1973 to 2016, net productivity rose 73.7%, while hourly wages essentially stagnated, increasing only 12.5% over 43 years. Americans are working more productively than ever, while the fruits of their labor have accrued to corporate officers, directors, and their shareholders. So we're working like slaves, actually. We're not getting the pay that we deserve. Is that correct? Sounds like it. Sounds like it. Back to George J. Chanos, he says, even though there's been an enormous amount of wealth created by our economy, life for average Americans hasn't improved. The average worker has gotten poorer, while the cost of just about everything has gone up. Moreover, no matter how big the gains in productivity have been, the government and the Federal Reserve have continuously created more money. They've done it by creating new credit and simply printing trillions of new dollars out of thin air. This new money has caused prices to rise more than productivity. Because wages are no longer connected to gains in productivity, there's nothing the average American can do to stay ahead of inflation. So, most Americans have been forced to borrow in a way that is unprecedented in our history. For those who have taken on these incredible new the debt loads, life is very stressful. This group is growing, and this stress and anger is building, ultimately fueling many of today's biggest issues. We've seen protests all over the country. Groups like Antifa, the New Black Panthers, and white supremacists are on the rise. We've seen NFL players refusing to stand for the national anthem. Mass shootings are occurring with alarming and unprecedented frequency. This isn't just about race, Donald Trump, or police brutality. It's about money, unemployment, frustration, and hopelessness. Hopelessness. Tens of millions of people in America are desperate. They have no way out. Death by drugs and suicide for the bottom 60% of America's population have doubled since 2000. Sooner or later, this hopelessness and despair is going to find an outlet, quite possibly a violent one. Millions of Americans are already calling for the government to, quote, do something, end quote. Some are calling for a, quote, universal basic income, end quote. Democratic presidential candidate, United States Senator Elizabeth Warren, is proposing a new annual tax on assets of the 75,000 wealthiest Americans. She has proposed a 2% tax on assets above 50 million and an additional 1% billionaire surtax, quote unquote, on households with a net worth exceeding 1 billion. Jeffrey Sachs, SACHS, a professor of sustainable development at Columbia University, proposes a single payer healthcare system modeled on countries like Canada and Australia, overhauling the economics of higher education, better school to work transition programs, a wealth tax, and an infrastructure program that would increase employment and training opportunities for workers. Others are calling for a clean slate to wipe out their debts. The idea of erasing debts to reset the financial system is not new. In fact, in the Bible, it's referred to as a jubilee, capital J, quote, end quote. If you're unfamiliar with the term, it comes from the Old Testament, the book of Leviticus, chapter 5. Pope Boniface the Eighth proclaimed the first Christian Jubilee in 1300. Since then, it's been used dozens of times when anger among a population hits extreme levels. Carla Reinhardt, Reinhart, of Harvard University, and Stephen Roach of Yale have already advocated for a debt jubilee in the United States, capital J. London School of Economics Professor David Graeber, Graeber, says, quote, we are long overdue for some kind of biblical style jubilee, capital J. It would relieve so much genuine human suffering, end quote. Paul Kedrosky, Kedrosky, a senior fellow at the Kaufman Kaufman Foundation, a liberal think tank, says, quote, we need a fresh start and we need it now. We need a jubilee, end quote. A jubilee which wipes the slate clean for millions of the most indebted Americans and, quote, resets, end quote, the financial system may become the leading political issue in years to come. Iceland used a jubilee in 2014 to restructure mortgages that were underwater. Croatia used a jubilee in 2015 to wipe out millions in consumer debt. The idea of a debt jubilee, capital J, has become the de facto solution when debts can't be paid. President Trump even suggested a debt jubilee for all of Puerto Rico's bond debt after Hurricane Maria. In 1841, the laws in America were temporarily changed so that debtors could be discharged of their debts without the consent of their creditors. It must be understood that a jubilee does not come without cost. It would redistribute trillions of dollars from those who have invested and saved to those who can no longer pay their debts. The stock market would experience huge losses, some Banks would close. Many companies would go bankrupt. Millions would lose their savings overnight. And while the cost of a jubilee would be high, it must be understood that inaction also has a cost. Barbara Ehrenreich, Ehrenreich, who wrote Nickel and Dimed on Not Getting By in America, is concerned by what she sees. The street protests and the increased anger toward immigrants, she says, quote, people don't always act rationally when they see their own life chances diminishing, end quote. Scapegoating. Millennials are now our country's largest generation, 85 million, outnumbering baby boomers, capital B, 80 million. They will have an enormous stake in whether or not a national debt jubilee is declared. According to a recent Harvard study, more than 50% of millennials, capital M, do not believe in capitalism. How they address the issue of income inequality will have significant and lasting consequences for the global economy. Those who emerge as millennial samurai will play an important role in this debate. So we are reading. Excuse me, I'll turn the page into one page, not two. There we are. Okay. We are reading from George J. Chanos' book, Millennial Samurai, A Mindset for the 21st Century. George J. Chanos was the Nevada Attorney General at some point in his career. He actually considered running for president, and he saw the political scene and said that it wasn't for him, and he walked away from the political scene. So he has a lot of this knowledge and wisdom. And I would say, um, the fortune cookie said, knowledge, no, knowing the right thing to do is wisdom, doing it is virtue. Uh, yep. Student debt. Chapter 131. Student debt. Millennials face the greatest student debt crisis ever faced by any generation. Student debt now exceeds all credit card debt. No other generation has had the level of debt that millennials now have, and millennials have even less opportunity to retire that debt than any prior generation due to stagnating wages and inflation. A 30-year-old today makes no more money than a 30-year-old did 30 years ago. Unfortunately, prices have continued to increase during those 30 years, so the same salary buys far less. Rent in some instances is 10 times higher than it was 30 years ago. Finally, 45% of millennials get out of college burdened by that crushing debt, only to learn that they can't get jobs that require a college degree. So, where does that leave them? They've taken on massive debt that they can't pay off for a degree that doesn't enhance their earning capacity. Essentially, millennials have been screwed by a for profit educational system that prior generations created. It served those prior generations well, but the same cannot be said for millennials. Add to that the depressing reality that our educational system was designed for the Industrial Revolution and is ill suited excuse me, to the technological revolution, and you have a recipe for failure. Excuse me. I want to say that no, I did not get a degree myself. And no, I don't have student debt. This crushing debt prohibits many millennials from saving money for retirement to buy a home or to start a business. This never happened before on such a large scale. Ultimately, as this situation becomes increasingly untenable, we will likely see more and more calls for student debt forgiveness. Something needs to change. The current for profit education system isn't serving us well. Certain services should not operate exclusively under a for profit model. Education is one of those services. Healthcare is another. These are necessities of life that have an enormous impact not only on quality of life but on society as a whole. New solutions need to be developed to provide these essential services to more people at lower costs. Student debt may be one of the first issues addressed by millennial samurai since it affects their generation most directly. How they address it will impact all of us. Will have an impact on all of us. Modern monetary theory is a long page, chapter 132. If you haven't heard about modern money theory, MMT, you will. It's the economic theory du jour of the day, and it will be all over the news in the months to come leading up to the 2020 election. So this was written a bit prior to the 2020 election. And it was when Donald Trump was president the first time through. We are on page 270. Let me take a look. Ay, ay, ay. Oh, here's the table of contents on this page. Wow. Hmm. In 2 chapters, we will touch racism. In 3 chapters, we will touch incarceration. In 4 chapters, we will touch global warming. In 5 chapters, we will touch the Second Amendment. In 6 chapters, we will touch hunger. In 7 chapters, we will touch water. In the next, we will touch loneliness, then mental illness, then EMDR, if you've ever heard of that. It's where the eyes get moved back and forth and you're thinking about a certain thing. It reprocesses that thought and puts it in a different uh, configuration in the brain. Excuse me. Then there is suicide, then fake news, then technology and employment. Excuse me. Okay, we have been coughing, but we're trying to get into some action via modern monetary theory. Theranos. Oh, my brother worked there. Social media. I have no more brother though. Okay, I'm just going to say. Sorry. Let me put it this way. If you don't like what I say, politically speaking, please say something else. Push the needle against me. If you don't like my position, put your hands on that indicator and push in your direction. Whatever we do, we've got to unite and everybody get our hands on the people's government. This is a democracy. Okay? Vote and vote and vote. Okay? That's all I want to say for today. Thank you for coming. Okay? Old Kinderhook.